Well, you heard of that cliche 90s movie, 4 weddings and a funeral. Well, this chapter today is 3 funerals, no weddings, and a sex scandal, which probably could mean that it's the church on any given day of the week these days. This last chapter that we'll look at as we conclude our journey through the lives of Isaac and Jacob is filled with fleeting moments that are like one of those montages in the final episode of a season of television. So let's take a look. On the back of the tragedy of Shechem that we unpacked last week, God finally speaks to Jacob once more, calling him to come back to where it all began, when they first met face to face on the outskirts of Luz, when Jacob was homeless and fleeing for his life, there at the place that Jacob came to call Bethel, the house of God. Jake has some sense that they need a reset as a family and as a community that has now absorbed the women and children survivors of the murder at Shechem. So Jake calls them to put away all the physical markers of their identity as worshippers of the local small g gods, their household idols, their clothing, and their piercings. Leave it all behind. Bury it. Because where we're going, those things cannot come. Bury it so that we can go forward together in unity under the one God, the creator God of the world, the God of my fathers. This is what baptism is actually all about. Leaving our past behind, burying it, leaving our allegiances to small g gods, to ideologies, to ways of thinking, to political parties, to certain kinds of spirituality and any other demands on our allegiance, any other things onto which we may look for wisdom and guidance, onto which we may place our trust for our lives. Into the waters of baptism they go, where we bury them and leave them for dead, just as Jacob buried those things under the oak tree on that day. And we do that so that we can rise into the house of God. And those of us who are baptized are on occasion called to take off our filthy clothing, the accumulation of the impact of sin on our lives in this age. Take it off and bury it under the oak tree there with the other stuff, the accumulated crud of life in this age. We've come to call such an action revival. Revival only comes when the church is prepared to repent, to take off its filthy clothing, to be cleansed so that it may go up to the gate of heaven and to become the house of God once more. What do you need to bury today? What do we need to leave behind, dead and buried, so that we may rise and enter fully into all that God has for us? In this episode of Jake's life, this is merely a pointer to what's coming in the form of baptism. And this cleansing, this renewal is short-lived. God is kind and he safeguards their passage. It says, because a terror from God fell upon the cities all around them. You might think, well, that sounds a bit weird. What does that even look like? But all it would take is for God to amplify the news in the cities round about of what has happened at Shechem, of how 2 guys all by themselves took out an entire city, for people to be absolutely terrified of what supernatural power might be beyond them. So people freak out. They close the city gates and batten down the hatches. And you might think, well, isn't that a bit of a stretch of the imagination? But look, it only took the threat of catching the flu a few years ago to lock down Victoria and the entire planet for the best part of 2 years. Humans be fearful creatures. While at Luz, which Jake had named the house of God Bethel, he learned that the woman who had raised his mum Rebecca had died and was buried nearby, implying to the reader that his own mother Rebecca herself had died much younger than expected. After running away from home, the sad thing is that Jake never saw his mum alive again and only came by this news in passing. Also, while in that place, God confirms with Jacob in this meeting with him that it was him physically in person there by the river Jabbok that wrestled with him and gave him a new name. So God repeats his new name to him. He repeats the same promises that he's already made to him. The same one that he made to his dad and his granddad all those years ago, that nations will come from his family and that the land will be given to his descendants forever. As Jacob moves on from this momentous and affirming encounter, tragedy strikes. His favourite, hottest wife dies in childbirth. As her life, poor Rachel, she's had a lot against her over the years and caused a lot of grief herself, and now in this final act of childbirth, her life is ebbing away. And all the sorrow of all the previous years mounts up upon her, and she names her child Benoni, son of sorrow. But Jake will have none of that. In an impetuous act, perhaps to reassure his dying wife, he renames his 12th son Benjamin, son of my right hand. And then she's gone, the love of his life. Perhaps this was a tender parting gift to her, that he would rename this son Benjamin, son of the right hand. But without a moment's thought, unfortunately, for his other 11 sons who are older. In naming this little boy his right hand, Jacob has made Benjamin the number one son in the family, displacing all the others that came before. The last has become the first. So Reuben, as the firstborn son, the son of the least favoured wife Leah, is shattered and does the unthinkable. He has revenge sex with Jacob's secondary wife Bilhah, as if to say, who's number one now? Who's your daddy now, Jacob? And perhaps Bilhah, flattered by the advances of a younger man and neglected by her husband, no doubt for years, consents. From start to finish, the Bible always displays polygamy as unhappy and destructive in every way. This first family of faith is one of the worst examples of polygamy. The wives have been jealous of each other and fighting for supremacy. In the past, the only daughter is treated as an item to be bargained with. And from here, the sons will tear at dad and each other, and the family will nearly come apart at the seams. We may not have polygamy like this in our society, but so often there is serial monogamy, with people moving from one relationship to the next, one de facto relationship to another, one marriage to another, birthing children along the way and leaving kids confused about, who is my dad? How do I connect to all these other siblings? And they're all left underfathered. In the beginning, God created us male and female and commanded that a man leave his mum and dad and his world behind and be joined to his wife so that they may become one. Lifelong monogamy is God's basic relationship unit for a flourishing human civilization. And lifelong monogamy between a man and a woman is his image amongst us, man and woman together. He designed it that way from the beginning. Go and read about it in Genesis 1-3. Western civilization has in part been so prosperous and successful because of our insistence on this basic biblical truth. of the priority of marriage between a man and a woman, leading to children. Since we wholeheartedly abandoned this truth in the 60s for an anything goes world of worship of sex, it's not free love, it's free sex. Our society has started to crumble. If our society is to flourish again, in part, it must get serious about marriage again and lifelong fidelity between a man and a woman. Finally, Jacob and the entourage come to Hebron, which is still there to this day, 4,000 years later. It's incredible, isn't it? He comes to his father's side for his final days. We get no window into that reunion. He comes together with his semi-estranged brother Esau and reunites one last time to lay their dad Isaac to rest. And an era comes to an end. Don't worry, we will pick this story up again next year when we come back to look at the story of Joseph from Genesis 37. Jacob came out of the womb grabbing onto his brother's heel, and his name means grabber. He grew up to be a lazy-bout lounge lizard, a mummy's boy. He grabbed his brother's birthright. He grabbed his brother's blessing. He ran like a coward. He got shafted by his uncle Laban, first in marriage, then in work commitments, then in wages, and then he in return shafted his uncle. He only called out to God when absolutely desperate. Otherwise, he lived almost an ordinary pagan life with God as a distant memory. He tried to bribe the unbribable brother to save his own skin and used his servants, wives, and children as human shields. This sinner had one shining moment when he fought in the flesh with God for everything he was worth, knowing that he had nowhere else to go, and so he won his blessing. He had another shining moment later when he called his entourage to bury their idols and leave that life behind. Yet, he callously disregarded his only daughter's plight during rape, hostage hell, and afterwards. And because he was annoyed at having to move again after paying good money for the land and trying to make a home in that place called Shechem. On the surface, if we were going to pick someone out of this story to be the successor of God's promises, we would pick Esau every time. A man's man, a rugged outdoorsman, a self-made man who had come from nothing to build up his life to the point where he had a 400-man private army, and a whole region was named after him already in his lifetime, Edom. This man is a self-made, successful man, and yet he treats God as though he's worthless. He treats God and his promises as though he's only worth a bowl of red lentil stew. Gosh, what an insult to God, giving him up for a bowl of vegan cuisine? Really? Far out. And the kind of man Jacob is, on the surface, there's no way we would pick him to do anything except stay on his lounge, collect his Centrelink check, and leave us the hell alone, right? But if God would choose this selfish, self-centered, mercenary, deceptive, disobedient, basically pagan bloke to work in and through to effect his salvation for the human race, then God is a God of grace, mercy, and patience. If God can show grace and mercy to a bloke like Jacob, then his grace and mercy is for you. God does not see us as an instant fix. You will continue to be a sinner till your life's end, although hopefully you do get better at being a Christian and worse at being a sinner. Too often when we hear stories of dramatic adult conversions to Christianity, we think Job's right, everything's done. New man, new woman, everything's left behind. But conversion, God choosing this sinner, saving this sinner, is the beginning of the rest of their lives. Our lives, not the end. We might bury our idols in the waters of baptism. We might scrape off sin in the heat of revival, but we, with Jacob, are a lifelong project of journeying out of slavery to sin and idolatry and into God's freedom and promises. There will be moments of brilliance and moments of abject failure. The good news, like the song says, is that God's love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. The God of this house, of St. Albans Church, King Jesus says to you today, it is by grace that you have been saved by faith. And this is not of your own doing. It is my gift to you. Amen.